And now a section on IP Source Guard where I, the instructor, get to insult you, the student, by telling you what IP Source Guard does. I think there may be a little more to it than that on the exam and, of course, in real-world networking. So let's have a look at this feature, and it's definitely another one of our name is the recipe features. IP Source Guard, what's its purpose? To prevent a host on the network from using another host's IP address, either accidentally or not so accidentally. IP Source Guard works in tandem with DHCP snooping. That sounds a little familiar. And it uses the same database to carry out this operation. Sounds familiar too. So we need to have DHCP snooping up and running before configuring IP Source Guard. So now we've got two different applications or services, features I should say, that depend on DHCP snooping to be up and running. Now with this feature enabled, what happens, a host comes online, starts the process of getting an IP address via DHCP. Once the host successfully acquires an IP address via DHCP, that host, which is connected to what we call an untrusted port, the switch takes note of this address assignment. And here, from the server, the address is coming in, your IP address is 172.12.12.1. Well, our multi-layer switch is going to pass that right along to that particular host, which in the illustrations is off of fast Ethernet 0/2. But at the same time, the multi-layer switch makes a little note to itself and says, okay, the correct source IP address for packets coming from fast Ethernet 0/2 or in on 0/2 is 172.12.12.1. Now, how does the switch do that exactly? What's it doing? Well, what it does, it creates a VLAN ACL, a VACL, and that allows the traffic to be processed by a port if that previously noted source IP address is present on the incoming traffic. Now this IP address to switch port mapping, it's generally referred to as binding. Do not let this term intimidate you. We're even going to walk through a manual binding to help you get over binditis, because a lot of people, especially first time they see it's like, oh, binding, I don't know if they had a bad experience somewhere, but you're not going to have one here, and we will hit that lab in just a few minutes. Now what happens though if this address doesn't match? If the host is pretending to be another host, well, what happens then is the switch will drop incoming traffic that does not match up with the source IP address 172.12.12.1. It filters it, as we like to say in network land, which is a fancy way of saying that we're just going to drop it. That's really IP Source Guard. Now we're going to enable it and work with the bindings a little bit. And once DHCP snooping is enabled and verified, as we will do on the live equipment in a moment, you want to use the IP verify source command to enable IP Source Guard at the interface level. Now you can see the two choices here, and we'll see them on the live equipment too. They're going to be the same, port security and smart log. Well, the default value checked, as we would all expect, is the IP source address. After all, this is IP Source Guard. But there are two important options, and port security, we get a little more security there, and I think you could see from that what it's going to be. The source MAC address of the incoming packets on that port, that's going to be checked against the settings in the local switch's MAC address table. And if those addresses match, all is well. If not, the packets are going to be dropped. Now, smart log, it enables the switch to send dropped packets to a NetFlow collector. If you are not using that feature, leave it alone, don't enable it, and be prepared to see the word disabled for log in the output of show IP verify source. That show command is a little strange. Running it is not the strange part, reading it can be a little strange. We're going to do that live here in just a moment. So give me a moment here, I'm going to pause the video, bring up the live equipment, and we'll get started with that lab. Alright, let's go ahead and bring that up. That went better than I thought. I was just very quickly did a write erase on it, no big deal, and was just going to configure it a bit before we got started with this lab. And I am working with a huge bandage on one of my fingers. It's going to be fine, but I didn't want to hold up production of these videos over a slightly, not so slightly mashed finger, but it may screw with my typing a little bit. I'm just going to warn you. And if you said something like, who would notice the difference? Well, to heck with you too. So let's go ahead and let's see. We've got DHCP snooping up and running. Everything's just fine there. So now we're going to go to interface 3. In this particular lab, I've got a router off this interface. And what I'm going to do first is just enable source guard on it. there are the two choices, port security and smart log. We've already discussed those. We know the deal there. And let's see if we get any messages in particular or anything like that. Now, if I didn't have DHCP snooping enabled, I'd be getting yelled at right now by the router saying you have to have that enabled or you have to have it enabled for this VLAN. And we're using the default settings since we just did a reload, a write erase and a reload. Let's go ahead and do show IP verify source. Here's what I meant by a little odd to read, and you'll see this as we continue. Now, I do have VLAN 1 over there all the way on the side, but this is what I'm talking about. It's real easy to look at this and say, oh, interface log. What's an interface log? Well, what it actually means, here's the information about the interface on the first line, and the information about log is on the second line. And we'll see that fill in here shortly, I hope, as we proceed with this lab. That doesn't have anything to do with the font size I'm running or the size of the window or anything. Every time I've run this command, you see that. And the first time I ran, I was like, interface log? What the heck? Interface log? So that's what it is. It's interface separate from log. My knowledge helps you avoid that pain. So let's go ahead and look at what we've got. We've got the interface fast Ethernet 0/3. That looks good. Filter type IP makes sense. Filter mode active. Okay. IP address deny all. That seems a little odd. Well, if I had DHCP assigned addresses going through this particular device, then we would see them here right now. Thing is, I've got a router over there and it has a fixed IP address. Did that on purpose for a couple of reasons. First off, I want us to at least get a little practice with this long-winded binding command. But secondly, I want to ask you this question. How can I tell what the MAC address is of router 3 without going to router 3? And let's just say I didn't even hint that it was off internet, fast Ethernet 0/3. What if we didn't know that? You just walked in, you're doing a lab, you're being asked something on the exam. How could you tell what the MAC address is of the directly connected router or that particular interface? And I just gave you a big hint with directly connected. I would run our old friend, show CDP neighbor. Really one of the first commands you might have learned in your CCNA studies. And it's amazing how often you come back to this because, of course, it is just, Cisco proprietary. It's only going to show you Cisco devices. And we have a full section of CDP coming up in the security section because it is so important to be able to see what devices are directly connected. So we know it's off fast 0/3, and I could look in the MAC address table and get that MAC address because I'm going to need it for the binding command. Now let me ask you this. What's the most efficient way to see what that MAC address is without looking at all of those CPU entries we know we're going to get? This is what I'm trying to avoid because we have all these static entries. I just want to see the MAC address for that interface. Well, we got a couple ways we could go there. We could go dynamic, and that shows us 2. But if we really wanted to tie it down a little bit, let me try backspace there. Interface comes in handy. And there we go. Now you think, well, there's only 2 addresses in the dynamic table. It's not real hard to spot the one we need. Yeah, but when you have 48 or 96 or something like that, then you'll wish you knew that filter, and of course you do. So we have the MAC address. Now one more question in this little pop quiz. What's a good way, one command that will show me the IP address for router 3, the one I need, which would be on the directly connected interface? You don't see it in showed CDP neighbor. There's no IP address here. What I need is a little detail. When you put that on there, you're going to get all kinds of information here. But the great thing is, here's our entry for router 1, and it's got the IP address of the neighboring interface right there. And right before the cutoff point on the more screen is device ID router 3, entry address is 10113. It's exactly what I needed. So I'll be doing some cutting and pasting there, but let's go back. IP verify source. Well, I didn't see anything here about a binding. Did you? I did not. What we need to do is go ahead and do that globally. Ta-da! Let's try that IP source binding. And there we go. We're at the 10-minute mark of this particular video, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this one. And on the next video, we will conclude this lab. And then we're going to talk about something that sounds like an awful lot of fun, VLAN hopping. Is it fun? Watch the next video. You'll find out. See you there.